So this is recording. I'm clicking the recording button right now, and we'll make this available later if you want to follow up with it. Also, we will be taking questions in the chat feature down in the bottom right of the GoToTraining panel. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those out. You can do that during the webinar. We'll try to facilitate those if we can. We may put off some of them towards the end. We'll have a question and answer time. We don't expect this to take the full hour today, so we should have plenty of time for questions. Before we get going, I wanted to just do a couple of things real quick. I wanted to introduce, I assume most of you are familiar with Secure Ideas, but if not, we're going to take just about 5 seconds here to tell you who we are. Secure Ideas is a security consulting company. Our bread and butter, what we're known for, has been penetration testing. We do a lot of training. We do general consulting. We have some subscription services, some vulnerability assessments, and stuff like that we do as well. So we would love to get to know you. If you have any engagements or anything that's coming up that you need our services for, we would love to reach out and work with you. We put a lot of emphasis on educating the community, and so anything that we can do to help make you better is what we're here for. And that leads us into today's topic with SamuraiWTF. That's our goal, is training and education and making everybody better. Also want to let you know just about some upcoming events, some places Secure Ideas will be. If you're going to the HIMSS, the healthcare conference in Las Vegas next month, we'll have a pretty big contingent there. We'd love to meet some of you guys at the HIMSS conference. Also, B-Sides, Oklahoma, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's coming up April 11th through the 13th. Our own Jason Gillam is going to be teaching a course on Python for pen testers, and that registration is available. Very low-cost training there, and it's a great conference. We'd love to have you guys. I'm personally in Tulsa and one of the organizers of the conference, so we'd love to have some involvement. And then also Converge and B-Sides Detroit. Those are coming up in May. Kevin Johnson, the CEO, is going to be keynoting at Converge, I believe, and we may have some other folks there as well. Kate, one of our consultants, is also an organizer and contributor there as well. So we'd love to see you guys. Where those are at. You can keep up with us on Twitter and other social media for other events where we're going to be at. But moving on, just to get to the point of today's webinar, I want to introduce Mic Whitehorn-Gillam. He's one of our senior security consultants. He's been with us for about 2 years now. He is kind of our local expert when it comes to web app security and development. Prior to being with Secure Ideas, he spent about a decade in web application architecture and development. He's got a wide range of experience in various programming languages, and he's become one of the driving forces for keeping SamuraiWTF up to date. If you're not familiar with Samurai, if you don't know what this webinar is all about, I'll let him explain it and give you a little bit more information. Mike's become kind of my go-to guy anytime I have code questions that are above my head. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to make him the presenter. And this is going to be a pretty technical webinar. There's not going to be a lot of slides. But let's see. There you go. Mike, you should have control. And we'll go from there.
All right. Okay. So, can everybody see my screen? Should look like a GitHub page right now.
Yeah, I think you're good.
All right. So, Samurai, I'll start with kind of what SamuraiWTF is, how it has been built in the past. Then I'm going to go through the repo a little bit and kind of show you around. There's not a lot to see. We're not going to have to spend that long there. Then I'll pull over the live VM and show it a little bit. So SamuraiWTF, or Samurai Web Testing Framework, is mostly a training environment for things like web application pen testing training, as well as defensive coding training. We use it for both, and it's been a community project for a number of years, long before I got involved. Historically, how it's been built is essentially it was a zipped up VM that was downloaded, updated, changed however it needed to be, zipped back up, and then uploaded again. It's been on SourceForge, and you can still find it there today. That obviously has some shortcomings when it comes to collaboration, right? Only one person can work on it at a time. If two people grab the VM at the same time and one installs some new packages and the other one fixes a bug, and then they both go and re-upload, well, the second one is sort of going to clobber the first one, and it'll become a bit of a pain to detangle at that point. Work will have to be duplicated to kind of get it back into the state that they were aiming for. There's also another area, and it's something a few people have commented on sort of the forums on the old SourceForge, just about transparency, and it's you're downloading a great big bundled VM, you can't entirely tell what's going on there. And I think a lot of those sorts of issues have sort of been solved by changing it in the way that we have. And why don't I just walk through the repo a little bit. So there's a big warning here that it is for experimentation only. I think, well, Nathan has taught a defensive coding class with it just recently. I did one as well at B-Sides DC with an earlier version of it last fall. So it's started to see some action. It's got some rough edges that'll need to be smoothed out. And we're hoping to sort of engage the community and get other people's ideas in there as well. Okay, so running through the repo quickly here, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. Do I need to zoom, or can you see all right?
No, I think it looks great.
Okay. So there's the Vagrant file. Now, for anyone that's not familiar with Vagrant, I'm going to do sort of the 30-second introduction to Vagrant. So Vagrant, here it is it's a product by HashiCorp. It is also open source. You can see the GitHub link up there. And essentially what it allows you to do is describe virtual machines, and there's an associated command line tool that you can use to spin them up. And the simple explanation of how it works is there's a repository of base boxes. They're essentially fairly bare bones versions of all sorts of operating systems, and you can actually create one. I've created a few that I use, and that becomes sort of the base image that the provider you're using uses to stand up the initial VM. So in the case of VirtualBox, for example, it would be one. That's one provider. VMware is another one. Those are probably the more common ones, the most widely supported ones in the kind of Vagrant environment. But there are providers for targeting AWS distribution. There are Hyper-V ones as well. And actually, I've used the Hyper-V ones. They work fine. It's just there are fewer boxes in the repo that support it. And any given box like that, any given one of those base boxes could have multiple providers. And behind the scenes, it's different versions of the base box that are configured the same way for the different platforms. But up front, you don't sort of notice the difference. You set your default provider, and then you run a Vagrant up command. You can see that's also their URL, Vagrant up command, which spins up the box. So going back over to my Vagrant file, this is Ruby syntax. I've never really been a Ruby developer professionally. I wouldn't say it's one of my go-to languages. I do all right with this because it's well documented and fairly easy to follow. So I would say don't let that put you off if you feel like contributing. I'm going down here quickly through the Vagrant file. Here's the base box that's described here, Bento Debian 9.1. So that'll correspond with one of those base boxes in the repos. And in this particular one, it's the Bento project. I think here it is. It's maintained by the Chef group. And so generally it sees really regular support. It definitely has providers for VirtualBox and VMware. And so we just start with that clean image and then pull in a bunch of other stuff and install the packages we need and all the software. That's all sort of a build process, essentially, to provision the box with all the Samurai training material. And most of that, you can see here, it's things like memory, the opening a GUI automatically. This whole block here is VirtualBox specific. And I think that's one thing that's changed a bit from previous Samurai, where VMware was the primary platform that was supported, and people got it working on VirtualBox, but it wasn't really explicitly targeted as much. And that's sort of reversed now. Although, like for example, for Nathan's defensive coding that he recently did, I know he built it in VirtualBox, exported it, got it configured and working on VMware with reasonably small effort. Things like the VMware tools wouldn't have been installed. But for the most part, that works. But VirtualBox is where most of the majority of the development and testing has been done, or rather, the majority of the testing during development has been done. So that's sort of the first class platform, I would say, which personally I like for a few reasons. One, because I think in the office I'm sort of known as the one person that has had more good experience with VirtualBox than with VMware. But also it's free. The price point makes it easier to take it out to conferences and run a defensive coding class or an intro to web pen testing class without having the overhead of licensing for the participants. And so that's an advantage. The other thing is in this file, so this is the default VM, this whole section here. And the difference between it and the others is that it runs all of these bash scripts to provision the machine. There are two other build options down there, and you're just specifying a different target on the command line. User environment, which is just the desktop without the targets. And by targets here, I'm talking the training targets, the vulnerable web apps, which are taken from other community projects. The other one is the target, which is just the targets, just those sort of on a headless server. I've used those to kind of build targets a lot during development, mainly because it tends to be iterative. I'll modify these bash scripts to incorporate different configuration or load different packages, and then I'll want to run a build. And sometimes it's nicer to just build the part of the machine that I'm working on. But the machine I'll be showing today is the default one, which is it's all of them basically. It loads everything. So going back up there, that was the Vagrant file again. If you're running Vagrant on the command line, well, one thing to know is if you're inside the install directory or the config directory or any other child directory, the way Vagrant works is it looks in the directory you're in for a Vagrant file, but then it works its way up the hierarchy until it finds one. So if you're in a child directory, you can still run all of the normal Vagrant commands and it'll work properly. I think most of the installation process is fairly accurate in this file, but certainly if you were to stand it up and have any issue with that process, open an issue in GitHub, and we'll take a look at correcting the README or fixing whatever is wrong with the process if we can. If you can fix it yourself and want to do a pull request, that's even better. So the other files you'll see here, so there's the GitIgnore, basically artifacts that are generated that we don't want source control. GitAttributes, and I think we have this right now. One of the challenges with doing this is it's as you saw, it's a Debian machine. So if you clone it down to a Windows system and you have Git's sort of popular auto CRLF set, the line endings on all those bash scripts will change and break them when they try to run them in Debian. So, okay, drilling quickly into the install directory, there are those, and we saw those. Those are the provisioning scripts that actually do all the sort of setup on the VM. And we'll go into a few of those. We're just going to kind of take a high-level run through them momentarily, but I'm going to quickly pop into the config first. And the config is a whole bunch of stuff that we just kind of copy onto the machine and use. So there's a bash script for standing up the different targets. Some of this stuff is config files like the OpenBox configuration for the OpenBox window manager. And that's another thing we changed this time around. Previously, it was Kubuntu that it was running on. So KDE, the KDE Ubuntu distro. And now it's kind of a base Debian install with OpenBox layered on top of it. For anyone that's been around the Linux community for long enough to remember Crunchbang, it borrows a little bit from Crunchbang in terms of UI design, which also managed to cut a lot of weight. And I can elaborate on that a little bit later as well. Also in here, this is the Nginx configuration. And so there are 3 targets in there right now, and a configuration for each one. And this just means we've got some decent, nice kind of URLs set up inside the VM for when you're viewing, those vulnerable web apps. I'm going to back out here and pop into the install. One of the nice things about having all the configuration there is it's source controlled. You can track who's changed it and what they've changed over time. And it's all quite transparent in terms of what's been set up in the machine. And the same is true in here. So starting with this one that's shared before, and you'll see in the build that does everything, and actually I think probably all of the targets use this one. This is the first setup step, and it's stuff that is shared regardless of whether you're doing just the targets or the combined environment or just the desktop. All of them need these things. So one of the first things it does is it pulls in the backports repo. It installs Docker, which brings us to another change. The targets are now basically, I think the 3 that we have in there, we have in Docker containers. And that just keeps their dependencies from stepping on each other at all. And I think over time, that's also going to make it easier for us to kind of plug in the targets, different targets as they become available, update them easily. And I'm hoping at some point, maybe we'll actually get like a target mixer, or basically an interactive way of selecting which targets you want in your build. Right now you get all of them, and which is the 3 I just showed you. So Docker Compose, those are the shared ones. And in case anybody's wondering why Docker is there for the desktop environment without the targets, WP Scan is the answer to that. The WordPress scanning utility, we deploy that through Docker as well. So, okay, running down quickly here, we have the targets bootstrap, and this is a whole pile of setup stuff for the targets, and some of that includes generating replacement configuration and wait, there's a user and password in there, plain text. That's by the way a bad practice in your Git repos to have passwords. Is also a bad choice of password, but it is a target environment. So there's a whole bunch of setup stuff, whole bunch. not going to go through it line by line right now, but certainly that's there. And we'll just take a little quick walk through the user environment setup as well. Python stuff. It actually sets up the Samurai user. It's historically one of the funny things about Samurai, and I'm not sure what came about intentionally, but one of the funny things about it was the username and password for the user were Samurai, and that wasn't very well documented. So it seemed like anywhere you showed up, where you were doing a training class with it, or if somebody even just downloaded it and set it up on their machine, that just wasn't something that was known. It was either people would guess it or they would have to ask. The username and password are still Samurai, and I still haven't corrected the fact that it's poorly documented. I think we have a plan for that, though. Anyway, it continues on and it installs. So you can see X there, OpenBox, some of the other desktop stuff, and then it starts adding in the apps. And what you'll see here is like Chrome gets pulled from Google's repo. As we go down the list here, this is the Burp Community Edition. That endpoint, I believe, will always get an up-to-date release. And a bunch of these are shallow clones from Git repos. OWASP Zap is in there, and I'm not sure for that one whether we've got that one on sort of a tip of the repo kind of version. That one looks like it might be a manual update. But for the most part, whenever you build the machine, you should end up with up-to-date packages, up-to-date tools. You can see Node 8, which I believe is the current LTS for Node. So it'll get the up-to-date version of Node 8. And that means one of the other issues previously, which was somebody has to download the thing, unzip it, update packages, and re-upload it. That should be fixed. It should be a case where if you run the build process through Vagrant, you end up with an up-to-date machine with up-to-date tools in general. Obviously, the concern there could be that there's some volatility. So far, we haven't seen any issue there, though, and hopefully it stays that way. Yeah, I think maybe let's just pull the machine over for everybody to see. So you can see here, I've got it open in VirtualBox. It's right-click to pull up the menu. If you end up with full-screen applications, this bar at the top will always be up there as well, which is a safe place to do it. It's got a smaller tool set currently. We're working on porting in more as we need them. In fact, would I be correct? I am. WP scan, which is the reason I said Docker was in there, isn't on the menu. Just because it's on the menu doesn't mean it's not in the repo, but it means it's a missing thing that should probably be an issue in the GitHub. So the terminal is there. I put in Sakura. I think it's a decent terminal choice. I know everyone's going to have a bit of a different preference there. One of the things about OpenBox is it's got these virtual desktops. And if you're sitting in a training room on a laptop trying to do a web app pen test, and you've got Burp taking up a whole screen, or Zap if you're teaching with that, I teach with Burp because I'm more familiar with it. Then it's nice to have the virtual desktops to be able to flip back and forth, in my opinion. So you can see the Juice Shop is here, already open in Chrome. There are plugins as well, just briefly. Wapalizer, Retire.js, Foxy Proxy, browser plugins. These install themselves automatically when Chrome is first launched. It's one of the things that's configured in it. And things like the proxy, there's no proxy config set up for default. And the reason for that is that usually in a training class, this is actually something Kevin Johnson raised a couple weeks ago when he was getting some training material together. He said, the proxy configuration isn't set up. I said, yeah, because whenever we teach a class, we always walk people through how to set up the proxy. Anyway, Foxy Proxy is there. It's not the only way to set up a proxy. Obviously, you can natively do it through Chrome's settings as well. It's a particularly convenient way to do it. Retire.js and Wapalizer, if you're not familiar with it, which shows you sort of what's in use. It fingerprints the web app, essentially. So the Juice Shop, and for anyone not familiar with Juice Shop, I really like Juice Shop. It's an OWASP flagship project. And it sees updates every week or two, it seems like, with new vulnerabilities. Yeah, I think for a modern web app, it's by far the best target I've seen for testing against. And it's got all sorts of fun stuff. And there is a scoreboard in it to find that then tells you, it gives you hints as to what else there is to find. I'm gushing over it a little bit. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic project that I like a lot. So you can see, just like the config files that we saw in the Git repo, I'm using this WTF top level domain, which I chose because SamuraiWTF, so that's sort of the tie-in, but at the same time, WTF is actually a real top level domain. Previously, in the older versions of it, I think the default, they were virtual hosts through Apache. It was how it was set up in the last version I saw previously. So they had the host names in there without top level domains. And what I found was that, I can't remember if it was just Firefox or if it was both browsers, but it tended to default to searching for that term instead of trying to open it, trying to request it as a URL. And by just tacking a made-up top-level domain in there, that changes that behavior and makes it easier. You don't have to append the protocol in order to make it do the right thing. Dojo-Basic currently has a manual step to it. It doesn't initialize. I hope I'm remembering this right. Hey, there we go. There we go. So this is the same old Dojo Basic, essentially, that Justin Searle has been teaching from. It's still a really good target environment, even today. And yes, it's built like an older PHP app, but in reality, there are still a lot of older PHP apps in the wild, which is one of the things I like to sort of emphasize when demonstrating a vulnerability that's in an older version of a JavaScript library or an older web platform. They didn't magically go away. Sometime in the last 3 or 4 years or 5 years or 10 years even necessarily. There's still tons of legacy apps that are just kind of sitting there and their teams are trying to secure them. And in a lot of cases, having to manually kind of patch for things that modern frameworks tend to take care of. So it's worth being familiar with older web apps as well. And then the Dojo Scavenger Hunt is the other one that's there, which we normally use at Security as in both our intro to pen testing, to web app pen testing, and our defensive coding classes. We tend to use this, or historically we have used this as the capture the flag exercise at the end of the training session. So those are the 3 targets that are there right now. Obviously, Chrome is there. Firefox is there. Hasn't been run before. I'm wondering if it, and hopefully nothing explodes. I don't actually have a backup plan if anything in the demo blows up. So you can take that to mean I'm very confident in this build of Samurai or not. So there's that. You've got burp, good old burp suite, Z-attack proxy, nmap and zenmap are in there. And actually that one is set up, yeah, that one is set up to actually prompt for Samurai again, for elevated permissions because it needs them. So that's up there as root right now. And yeah, that's the basic toolkit there. SQL map, Nic2. There might be a few others that aren't on the menu. The menu is something that we're manually maintaining. We're not using any kind of automated script to generate it. It's just one of those config files in the config directory. So that's sort of the state of this build of Samurai. Let me grab, hold on a second there. All right, so I got that up there, and I'm going to grab another window from over here. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so do I need to zoom? There we go. So Vagrant destroy. I'm hoping this is going to work the way it normally works. The long way is nothing to worry about. There we go. Okay. So that blows up the VM. And if I go over to my VirtualBox manager, which is right here, that's not it. That's a different VM of mine. Samurai is gone. So if I run Vagrant up, it'll rebuild. And when I timed it earlier today, it took around 5.5 minutes for it to do that. So it's not super fast, but a lot of that is fetching stuff. No, I don't know how to say it. Mutility is currently not there. There are a whole bunch of open issues for adding. Sorry, I was responding to the question in the chat there. There are a whole bunch of issues for adding other targets that are missing, including that one. But currently, it is not in today's build. So actually, like half the open issues right now are targets, and a lot of that came from wanting to make it so that even if it's something we don't use in a class necessarily, it can be taken after. It can be taken after a class for somebody to continue learning on their own. BWAP is there as well because that was one that is particularly good for just isolating one particular vulnerability to show it off. So this is what is currently going on in the VirtualBox for Samurai. This is the initial login prompt that it shows. You can see it's actually still doing stuff in the background. So if you're building it, that's one thing you'll see is this comes up almost right away. There's nothing you should be doing with it, actually. Just let it run because the last command in the setup script is a reboot. So I'm going to let that run in the background while we kind of talk a little bit more. Yeah. So we're kind of in here. Some of these should probably be closed. This more flexible turn, yeah, that was before Sakura. Yeah, so there's stuff in here. Certainly, if you're playing with it, add things. Don't hesitate to open an issue if you see something that could be better. If you see something that seems to be broken, there could be things that we've gotten used to. Like we've been playing with this particular build of it for maybe 8 months now. There are things we could be used to kind of stepping over instead of dealing with. So new fresh eyes on it would be better at spotting a lot of issues than the people that have been looking at it for probably a little bit too long to spot some of those nuances. That build is still going to be running. So you can see right now it's getting the JDK. It's not very friendly, kind of scrolling by there, but is those shell scripts executing. I think I just saw WP scan actually install, so it is there. Now I'm going to pop into the config real quick here and find that menu. Yeah, there it is. So where I was saying the menu file is a manual update. It's the Menu.xml in config there, and you can see the stuff that you actually saw there is listed. For some of them, it's in the path, and it's just an easy command. For others, like remember ZenMap had those elevated permissions. They're set up like that. For a lot of the terminal-based ones, what it does is run the help for it. So unfortunately, I just already destroyed the VM. If I had chosen Nmap, it should have opened a terminal and run the Nmap help, and then left me with an open terminal. That would be the correct behavior anyway. So that's sort of the short version of where it's at. Like I said, we would like to engage sort of the community to get involved. Certainly, anybody's free to, this is a public repo, anybody's free to grab this. See, I'm not even signed in. Anybody's free to grab this, take it down, clone it, play with it, fork it, submit a pull request, kind of do what you need to do. The goal is to make it better. The goal is to keep it I see the question there. I'll answer that in a second. To keep it in the community and keep it available for training for individuals wanting to practice things on their own, or for people looking for a training environment to bring to a conference. If you remember, I pointed out in the Chrome browser, it downloads the plugins the first time it runs. So if you were packaging up a ready-made VM that you were going to hand out on a external storage, a thumb drive or an external hard drive, in a conference training classroom, then you would want to probably run that first. Start up the VM, open Chrome, and just get those plugins installed. Everything else should work locally without an internet connection. Once the machine has actually been built. Now the build fetches all sorts of stuff. You need a connection if you're running the Vagrant up command. Now going back, so user-env bootstrap, yes, I believe all of the tools are in there. Some of their dependencies are in the. So the question was, are all the tools installed in the user-env bootstrap? Yeah. All the pen testing tools are. All the dependencies that are only dependencies for them are, and as is the GUI. If you scroll down here, Nmap, ZenMap, Firefox, I guess LeafPad, I don't remember adding that. I don't know who did. Chrome is in there, WP Scan, Burp, Nick2, FuzzDB, SQL Map, Zap. It's, yeah, this is where the tools are put in, all in here. So the other things would be, there's the shared stuff. These are dependencies. They would be necessary for some of the things in the user environment bootstrap. And then obviously the targets are their own sort of stuff. Were there any, did I miss a previous question? No. Okay, cool. The other thing that's interesting about what we've done, and it's sort of the last point that I sort of want to talk up, is we've managed to reduce the size a fair bit. So the previous version of it on SourceForge is zipped. It's 3.8 gigabytes. Extracted, it ends up being over 9. This one, if you just build the machine and export the OVA right away, I believe I was running around 2.7 gigabytes. That's including the full Debian distro and all the tools and targets loaded on top of it. Also, if you're just distributing the Vagrant, well, the repo itself is only, pardon me, only a meg and a half. So it's really tiny. Now, obviously, that's fetching a lot of stuff at that point. The Debian-based box is, I think, 700 or 800 megabytes on its own. And the way Vagrant works is it'll cache that on your computer someplace. It's home/.vagrant.d is the directory where it stores your base boxes. But the advantage of that is you can create and destroy them kind of at will. And if you have a whole bunch using the same base box, like I'll use that same Debian base box for if I'm working on an app for my test server, my local test server. And that still only caches the one copy of it. And I can stand up one VM, stand up the other, destroy one that I'm not using anymore, just sort of as needed. So there is an inefficiency to gain there. But obviously, if you're not using one anymore, you want to manually go in and remove the box. And there's probably a command line command for it too, but I don't generally use it. And that's sort of it for what I wanted to show and tell. I'll check the state of the build right now. Looks like it's finished, actually. Somewhere while I was talking, it finished. You can see that the prompt now actually says SamuraiWTF, and Samurai will still boot into the desktop environment. Were there any other questions? I'll leave that open for anyone who has questions. So it's the SamuraiWTF is both the organization and the project on GitHub if you're looking for the repo. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and hang out here for just a second and see if anybody else has any other questions coming in. While we're waiting here, I'm going to switch back over to. All right, can you guys see my slide again? All right, there's the link for the GitHub if you didn't catch that before. If you want to contribute, as Mike was saying, one of the things that we're really hoping for is to get more involvement from various folks. Even if you don't really know a lot about what you're doing, if you haven't used GitHub before, this is a great opportunity to get in, poke around, look at the issues. There may be something. Sharing your perspective. Can you guys see my? Can you see my screen? Maybe not.
Yeah, we've got your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the one with the presenter notes on it though.
What? It says it's the other one.
All right, now it's right.
That's right. That's weird. I didn't change anything. I just selected it and deselected it. Awesome. Technology is great. Well, like I was saying, if you want to get involved, we'd love to have you jump in, see if there's something that you know how to fix, or just start playing with. Submit a pull request. If it's your first time, let us know. Hey, I don't know if I did this right, but I tried, and maybe that's something we can walk you through and show you how to do better next time. We'd love to have that. I was also going to mention, I mentioned the upcoming events earlier. We have something else that we're just in the process of planning out. We're going to start doing what we're going to call professionally evil lunch and learns. And the idea is that we all eat lunch. And so why not once in a while spend some time together, hang out, and let's talk about security. So the first one's going to be in 2 weeks, February 27th. And the general topic is going to be the OWASP Top 10, the new version of the OWASP Top 10. The idea is bring your lunch, come to your desk, sit down, log in with us, and we're going to have a couple guys. Probably myself will be leading it, Nathan Sweaney. We'll have Kevin Johnson and probably one other guy on as well. And we're not going to have a bunch of slides. It's not going to be a formal presentation. We're going to start up our webcams, and we're just going to argue about security stuff. So if that sounds like a good time, if you want to participate, contribute some questions, jump in, tell us we're wrong, tell us we're right, whatever, we'd love to have you. And if this goes well, we're going to try to make it a regular occurrence. So we should have a link with or without bourbon. You know what? Alcohol is totally an optional thing at your own. Somebody suggested that maybe we could provide lunch for everybody that attends. I don't know if we can work that out, but we may see in the future, if this goes well, if we can do some type of like discount coupons at some local lunch place or something to the first so many people that sign up. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, we'd love to have you the first one. You can go to secureideas.com/classes, and that's where all of our webinars and classes are available. I don't know that this one is up there yet, but it should be by the end of the day. So just check back for there. Also watch, follow us on Twitter, and look for that sort of thing. That's pretty much it. Like I said, there's the URL if you want to get involved. But other than that, I think Mike and I will just stay on here for a few minutes. If you have questions, otherwise, shoot us up on Twitter or email or on GitHub. Thanks a lot, everybody.